The Simpsons. I do not know a single person who has not heard of this American animated sitcom that made its debut in 1989 and still going, because Prime Simpsons is simply untouchable. A funny joke every 2 seconds, endless pop culture references that actually fit with the scenes, literally hundreds of recognizable characters that can all make a case for your favorite, just animated TV show perfection. It might be my favorite TV show of all time. If you've watched my reviews over the years, whenever I made a metaphor, there were plenty of occasions when I used The Simpsons, and above my TV and gaming consoles, you will see all this Simpsons stuff that I've been collecting for nearly 2 decades. Clearly, it's a show I've been watching for as long as I can remember, and to this day, I still watch it regularly. However, when it comes to video games, they don't have the same reputation. Simpsons games have existed about as long as the show, as far back as the NES, but like a lot of licensed titles around that time, none of them were exactly masterpieces. Apart from the arcade title developed by Konami, that's an excellent one right there.
How am I gonna get that new game?
Who cares? Video games are so late 90s.
But coincidentally, it's the same story for the developers behind Hit and Run. Radical Entertainment was formed in Vancouver in 1992 and got off to an incredibly rough start. For example, The Terminator, Wayne's World, Mario's Missing, Mario's Time Machine all on the NES, Beavis and Butthead on the Sega Mega Drive, Independence Day on the PlayStation, all developed by Radical and have appeared prominently on the Angry Video Game Nerd, which clearly puts things into perspective, especially when it comes to licensed titles. So if you knew Radical Entertainment's crooked track record by this point and found out they acquired the license to make a couple of Simpsons games in 2000, it was just par for the course for the next generation, particularly when looking at the last few Simpsons games around the new millennium. Worst games ever.
Ugh, video games, what a waste of money. Now to go online and bid $1,000 for itchy and scratchy corncob holders. A terrific expense.
Anyway, Radical's first game was The Simpsons Road Rage. Basically Crazy Taxi with Simpsons characters. Unfortunately, so much like Crazy Taxi that Sega actually filed a lawsuit against EA, Fox Interactive, and Radical Entertainment for plagiarism a couple of years later. After playing a little bit of Road Rage for this review, yeah, I can understand why. However, according to Vlad Soroldi, their vision was to make a 3D interactive version of Virtual Springfield, where all the separate maps included were supposed to be connected into one seamlessly without loading times. But after they discovered that the PlayStation 2 couldn't handle the constantly loading map, they had to almost completely redesign everything to keep as much of their original vision as possible. Fortunately, the final product was commercially successful enough, so Road Rage 2 was greenlit. And this time, things were going in a better direction. Using inspiration from what was by far the most popular game at the time, Grand Theft Auto 3, now you're able to get out of your vehicle and enter some of these iconic buildings of Springfield, trying to cram in as much references from the show and a little bit of satire on the games they were taking inspiration from.
When will they learn? Video games don't kill people, they just kill their minds.
It also helped that, like most Simpsons games, it was written by writers of the show at the time and features all the members of the main cast. They already had the town and the characters, therefore it was the perfect fit for an open world game. The Simpsons Hit and Run was released for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, Nintendo, GameCube, PC, but not on Super Nintendo Chalmers on September 2003. We're looking at the Xbox version played on the 360, so mind the screen tearing, and this might genuinely shock you, ladies and gentlemen. Despite what you saw from my Simpsons collection, this is my first proper attempt at this game.
What?
Yeah, I once played a demo of Hit and Run for the GameCube at a Kmart in 2003. Seeing Chief Wiggum roll around like a Duff beer bottle is what I remember most that day. At least I think it was Wiggum, but that's about it. It's only when my reviews of open world games became popular on this channel did Simpsons Hit and Run come back to me. And let's just say that it's one of the top 5 most requested games on this channel, and gets suggested on Patreon nearly every month, but usually not with the most votes. Well, the time has finally come, so grab yourself a Duff and some steamed hams, because this is a good one.
Hey! I'm endorsing a new cola, kids! And this one isn't poisonous to anybody!
That we know of.
Cola. Must get buzzed cola.
So things are normal in the town of Springfield, at least what you call normal in the Simpsons universe. For starters, Homer is doing endless errands for family and neighbors just before going to work.
Homie, Lisa left for school without her science project. Can you get it to her?
Oh, do I have to?
You can drop it off on the way to work.
And I have to go to work?
However, the citizens of Springfield notice a lot of camera wasps and black vans appearing all over town.
Marge, that black van is spying on us.
In other news, local citizens are outraged over the discovery of surveillance cameras throughout the town.
I, for one, welcome our new insect overlords, just so I can destroy them. But then things become even stranger when Bart becomes possessed, crop circles are appearing. It's all one big plan for Kang and Kodos to destroy the planet that the foolish Earthlings reside. A good excuse to add a Treehouse of Horror chapter, I guess.
Oh man, that sounds cool. I mean, oh no, I hope their plan fails.
And it's up to the Simpsons and Apu to foil their plans.
I know it's a cliche, but ay caramba!
Now, I like that it's something you wouldn't expect from a canon episode, and because there are so many different villains on the show, Mr. Burns, Snake, Kang and Kodo, Sideshow Bob, you never know who the main antagonist of this game is at first. Like, I was expecting a villain made for this game.
Smithers, release the hounds. And if this oaf is an employee of the plant, fire him at once.
However, this is nothing like the time when I reviewed South Park: The Stick of Truth a few years ago, where it felt like I was reviewing a long episode. In Simpsons Hit and Run, the story feels like it's tailored to everything in this game. The character interactions, change in map design, references to the show, even difficulty curve. Except for actually telling a story.
Why? That sounds hilarious. I'd watch that show.
Tell you what, you're a bad little boy.
I'm not saying it had to be 100% realistic, but the way events occur feels so disjointed since most of the game is just doing errands for different characters. I wasn't even paying attention, but I'm completely fine with this. Because if there's one thing every Simpson game excels in, including the bad ones, because they always use cast and crew members from the show, it's sending you into that universe with all the recognizable voices and jokes.
You remember that cooler I gave you for your birthday? Well, Flanders wants it back.
Now what will I use for a toilet?
And Hits and Run is the biggest showcase of that immersion. You just want to play through the show's references that can only be noticed by true Simpsons aficionados.
How are you this fine day? I have sold my kidneys 3 times. I have no idea what's keeping me alive.
There are enough different characters to interact with that you won't hear too many complaints about their favorite character not appearing in this game. And it's also cool to see one interacting with another you wouldn't expect. Like Bart and Cletus, Marge and Hans Moleman, or Apu and Louie.
You shouldn't stick your nose in other people's business. It could come back to haunt you. And your family.
Oh my gosh.
Though I was surprised Apu was the only character outside the Simpsons family to be playable. After playing Road Rage, I guess I was expecting more playable ones like Chief Wiggum, Ned Flanders, or Milhouse to name a few. Fortunately, a majority of them make multiple appearances throughout the game's story. And you know what? That's good enough for me.
Hi, Dr. Nick.
Hi, everybody.
You seem like a heavy drinker. Do you have a blender?
Not now, okay? My monkeys have escaped.
And it isn't just the characters. Look at Springfield. I had to limit the things I have to say for this review because whenever I drive past something I notice, I instantly remember the episode it's based off, like the flick of a switch. Including Moe's Tavern, the Quickie Mart, Krusty Burger, Channel 6 Studios. Seriously, there are too many to point out. But also a lot that only appeared in an episode or two, like the Monty Burns Casino, Duff Brewery, Camp Krusty, Chester J. Lampwick, Solar Golden House, that Crash Monorail, Earl the Lighthouse. Oh wow, there is an insane level of detail and fan service put into Springfield, and it gives you that realization just how expansive The Simpsons is as a fictional universe. It has every type of character, building, landscape, the footage speaks for itself. It's amazing how many memorable quotes and references there are, yet the whole show is heavily inspired by pop culture. If I had to criticize, it's strange seeing characters in 3D. This was before some licensed games try to look as much like the TV show or movie as possible, with one in particular looking excellent. And I wish there were unique animations for certain characters based on what they're saying during conversations. Like that does not look like Abe sleeping or Milhouse crying.
It's never a good time!
Maybe everything's just coming up Milhouse. But otherwise, if you're a Simpsons fan, this is the best part of the whole game.
I have road rage and I know how to use it.
However, don't think that Hit and Run is set on one giant map of Springfield the size of GTA San Andreas. There are 3 small maps set in different areas, much like Road Rage, small enough that you'll know the route of each one after half an hour of gameplay. But after the developer's experience with that game, knowing the limitations of the consoles, in Hit and Run these are more focused in comparison, and it looks and feels like the Springfield from the TV show, albeit compressed. Like going to a Simpsons themed amusement park, with the way lots of different buildings are placed. Who would have thought Camp Krusty and the Springfield Dam were right next to each other? But what I like is they're designed for gameplay in mind, with all the shortcuts and interchange every chapter since you visit these small maps more than once. The whole thing feels like it was designed to be driven at top speed, especially towards the final few chapters. But because vehicles are slower than Road Rage, it gives you a chance to soak in the Simpson atmosphere. Sticking with the subject of vehicles, unlike Road Rage where the slightest touch veers you to the footpath or into oncoming traffic, cars in this game feel like go-karts. They're highly prone to oversteering, particularly when you hit something, and occasionally it's hard to tell what's destructible, but otherwise, a lot more manageable. Easy to pick up and play.
Afraid not.
Afraid so.
Afraid not.
Afraid so. Oh, damn your lightning fast wit.
And whenever you're driving, each one controls differently by speed, handling, durability, and each Simpson and Apu get their own unique vehicle which are very similar to the ones in Road Rage, and plenty of others to unlock throughout the story which, like the rest of the game, relate to somebody's favourite episode. Otto's bus, Chief Wiggum's police car, and the Homer car to name a few.
Pay up, sucker.
You're charging your own son?
Yeah, I guess I am.
Don't worry, Bart, at least it doesn't cost 82,000 coins. And another thing I'd like to mention about the small maps is, unlike typical open world games where most have multiple streets and blocks, well, in Hit and Run, apart from a few little spots, the entire thing is one way without a dead end, like a street circuit with obstacles, shortcuts with a couple of spanners to instantly repair your vehicle, and combine that with the driving mechanics, you can almost call it an open world kart racer where driving missions take center stage.
I should do that more often.
It wasn't what I was expecting, being behind the wheel 90% of the game, but considering what the other 10% is like, which I'll get to, I'm glad it's like that. And it matches with the game's title, Hit and Run.
Vengeance will be mine.
Hey, watch it!
I am too smart. I am too smart. S-M-R-T. I mean, S-M-A-R-T.
Now I know why they call Homer slow. With the type of missions you do throughout the story, honestly I compared this game more to Driver than Grand Theft Auto. Smashing vehicles, collecting items against the clock, and after you complete them in a chapter, you advance to a different map.
What the heck were you thinking?
My convertible! I just waxed an undercoater.
That's what you get for expecting me to do the job for which I am paid.
However, where it does take a lot more inspiration from GTA's, you can ignore Marge Simpson at the front yard of 742 Evergreen Terrace and find other things to do in Springfield, like collecting cards in hard to reach places, spotting iconic gags from the show. If only I could find a way to get Homer up there at that moment. Purchasing and finding special vehicles and outfits using coins scattered all over Springfield. Once again, an SMRT smart use of the show's references, where every outfit is that one you remember from the show. So many I wasn't expecting. And for some of these other things to do in Springfield, you enter these buildings like Moe's Tavern and the Quickie Mart.
Yeah, freezer burn on my beard.
Anyway, trying to not go off topic. Finally, there are also checkpoint-based missions like making an illegal bet with Louie and entering races and time trials organized by either Milhouse, Nelson, or Ralph.
3, 2, loser says what?
What?
As well as Patty and Selma for some reason congratulating you for your victory. I bet Homer found that unbelievably satisfying. I like the way pedestrians and characters fall over and roll around like Duff beer bottles. Relax, Lenny, it's not like I hit you in the eye.
My daddy's going to put you in jail. Bye!
You can, however, get in trouble for Hit and Run, as you have a wanted meter which slowly fills up the more destruction you cause around Springfield.
This is a school zone!
Yeah, think of the children, Marge. And if the meter is full, it triggers the police, and if they bust you, you find 50 coins. And no, they're nothing like the cops from Springfield TV show. In Hit and Run, they'll get you easily. Like too easily. It's not like Need for Speed Most Wanted where you're given a couple of seconds before actually getting busted. Even if you're simply next to the police vehicle moving slowly, it's instantaneous.
Hey, you don't know who did it, do ya? Cause if you did, boy, that would be great.
Maybe waking a police officer really is a heinous crime in Springfield. But at least unlike GTA, Busted doesn't give you the stone of shame, and 50 coins, it's honestly a slap on the wrist. However, if you restart the mission after getting busted, the fine still counts, so be careful. Yes, it slowly but surely gets harder by the time you reach the final few chapters. So when you return to some of these maps for a second or third time, it's basically mandatory to know where all the shortcuts are. The wanted meter goes up faster, time limits are shortened, and there are more vans on the road that put you to a complete stop if you ram it. And those races, that sprint along the squid port, I swear a perfect run doesn't guarantee a win. However, while it sets the right difficulty curve, it does feel repetitive by the time you reach the final chapters since you return to the same map more than once, and it's the same missions every time, just with a new vehicle to drive. Like literally the last 3 missions, all you're doing is driving from one side of the map to the other, only driving something different and 10 seconds shaved off the clock each attempt. Since it's the finale I'm talking about, I'll avoid spoiling it by leaving it that, but it certainly made the ending feel highly anticlimactic. Like, oh, is it a happy ending or a sad ending? It's an ending, that's enough.
So very harmless.
As I said before, there's no such thing as death in this game or something along those lines, nor are there any freaking guns. Because the only enemy that puts up a fight on the map are these camera wasps that can take away your coins, which doesn't sound like much, but by the time you reach the final few chapters when those outfits and vehicles are more expensive, that's the last thing you want. Not just because you want to waste any progress you've made, but the on-foot controls are the suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked, and I almost mean that. You have a double jump, a slam, a sprint button.
Wow, I need a disco nap.
And some parts of the map that require a bit of platforming are based off the aforementioned iconic buildings and areas, with all the destructible boxes, scattered coins, and trampoline vents. Whee! All sounds fun and simple as the driving, right? But okay, I confess. I also once played Simpsons Hit and Run on the PlayStation 2 just before I created this channel from a friend recommendation, of course. And after a few minutes of on-foot gameplay, learning the mechanics, jumping around the roofs of the Quickie Mart and nuclear power plants, I actually wrote the whole game off as badly aged then and there, assuming that most of the game was going to have these platform stages where gravity was too high. Even though you have a double jump, it's difficult to get any momentum. In midair, you just fall straight down. You can only rotate horizontally, which make platforms and these insect overlords borderline impossible to calculate, especially when they're moving, or if the camera gets stuck on walls and ledges like Super Mario Sunshine. Basically, it set a very bad first impression. And during the story missions where it requires you to collect stuff on foot on a time limit, I felt like I was going to crack any minute Purple Monkey Dishwasher. Though considering Radical Entertainment's history with platformers, suddenly it's not as surprising. Sorry, it feels like I'm ending another review of a good game on a downer. I refuse to do that. Fortunately, there are only 2 instances where this item collecting on a time limit occurred. The only difficult parts remain on the road, and you typically succeed after the 2nd or 3rd attempt. And I was going to mention that if the on-foot controls were as solid as other classic platformers from that era like Ratchet and Clank, it would have opened other opportunities to explore Springfield, like creating separate platformer levels inside larger buildings or the outskirts, much like the Jack and Daxter trilogy. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the review, the developers knew the limitations of the consoles this time round. It makes a difference when you're trying to make a game for multiple systems, and didn't want to have the same hiccups as when they were making Road Rage, so this time the maps are designed more accordingly, and driving remains a primary focus. Like a lot of open world games from the early 2000s that I've reviewed recently, the genre was still fresh. Even the Grand Theft Auto titles before Hit and Run had a few spots that felt empty. It's easy to forget these games are nearly 2 decades old. The concept of exploring, driving somewhere else, and break the status quo felt so radical at the time, especially in a proper 3D virtual Springfield. So whenever it provided the best of times and the blurst of times in different spans, the references to the show more than make up for it. I felt like a kid in some kind of a store. By the time I completed the story, I checked to see if you could go back to the chapters and find all the secrets you missed for the achievement hunters out there. The answer is yes, by the way. I even enjoyed doing that. that, it felt so casual. Even though it's my first proper playthrough of this game, it feels so incredibly nostalgic driving through such detailed Springfield. It always put a smile on my face. And it'll happen to you. You wonder why a follow-up was never released given how successful it was critically and commercially. The Simpsons as a show is still going, open world sandbox is one of the most popular genres, and people still rave how good this game is today. Why do you think I'm reviewing it now? It sounded like a no-brainer. And according to Hidden Run producer Joe McGinn, he thought so too, as the developers did make some early prototypes under the assumption that there would be a sequel, which took heavier inspiration from GTA Vice City, including a full-scale size Springfield with a lot more classic references to the show and increased gameplay variety and character interactivity, which if you're a Simpsons fan, that to you sounds like game of the decade levels of potential.
But that game sounds awesome!
And therefore should be destroyed.
However, during renegotiations between license and IP owner where a multi-game deal was in the works, things fell through when higher-ups of Vivendi Games didn't want to risk the costs of renewing the license when they already had other IPs to work with. Lousy cheapskates. Instead, Gracie and Fox made a deal with Electronic Arts in 2005 and released their own game. If only Radical Entertainment weren't purchased by Vivendi Games the same year, there would have been a chance of EA letting Radical continue where they left off on Hidden Run 2. Instead, they focused on other licensed and established IPs, including The Incredible Hulk, Crash Bandicoot, Scarface, and eventually their own IP after Vivendi was bought out by Activision, Prototype. But if there's one game that deserves at least a remaster, it's this. If ever you get a chance to find a decent price for Hidden Run, take it. Not the best open world game of that generation, but a very likable one, and easily the best of the Simpsons franchise. Thank you, and come again.
At least we don't have to sit through the stupid video game credits. No!